The snow fell in thick, silent curtains over the city, blanketing the streets in pristine white that would soon be stained with secrets and blood. Christmas Eve had transformed the urban landscape into something almost magical, with twinkling lights strung between buildings and the distant sound of carolers echoing through the alleyways. But beneath the festive veneer, the city's underworld never slept, never celebrated, never forgave. Dante Moretti pulled his black coat tighter against the cold as he stepped out of the restaurant. At 35, he commanded an empire built on fear, loyalty, and an iron will that had never been challenged successfully. His dark hair was touched with premature silver at the temples, and his gray eyes held the kind of coldness that came from making impossible decisions since he was 20 years old. Tonight, he'd come alone to meet with the Volkov brothers, a necessary evil in maintaining the delicate balance of power that kept the city from tearing itself apart. The meeting had gone well. Too well, perhaps. Dante's instincts, honed by 15 years of surviving in a world where trust was a liability, whispered warnings he couldn't quite articulate. He nodded to his driver, who waited by the black sedan, then paused. Something felt wrong. The street was too quiet, the shadows too deep. The first shot came from above, shattering the crystalline silence. Dante felt the impact before he heard the sound, a burning sensation that spread across his left shoulder and spun him sideways. Training took over. He dropped low, reaching for the weapon at his hip, but the second shot caught him in the side, and the third grazed his leg. His driver was already down, slumped over the hood of the car. Dante stumbled backward into the alley, his hand pressed against his side where warm blood soaked through his shirt and coat. His vision blurred at the edges. He could hear shouting now, footsteps running toward him. The Volkovs had betrayed him, or someone had betrayed them both. It didn't matter now. What mattered was survival. He pushed himself deeper into the maze of alleys, leaving a trail of crimson drops in the snow. The festive lights from the main street grew distant. His legs weakened with each step, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. The cold that had seemed merely uncomfortable before now felt like knives in his lungs. He pressed himself against a brick wall, sliding down until he sat in a pool of his own blood, the snow around him transforming from white to deep red. This was how it would end, then. Not in a blaze of glory, not in some epic final stand, but bleeding out in a dirty alley on Christmas Eve while families celebrated inside their warm homes. Dante closed his eyes, feeling the darkness creeping in from the edges of his consciousness. He thought of his younger sister, Maria, who'd begged him to leave this life behind. He thought of his mother, dead these 10 years, who'd wanted so much more for him. The sound of footsteps made him force his eyes open, hand tightening on his gun despite his failing strength. If they'd come to finish him, he'd take at least one of them with him. But the figure that appeared at the end of the alley wasn't one of Volkov's men. It was a young woman, bundled in a red coat with a white scarf, her dark hair dusted with snowflakes. She carried shopping bags in both hands, clearly on her way home from last-minute Christmas shopping. She stopped dead when she saw him, her eyes going wide. "Oh my God!" she breathed, dropping her bags. They hit the ground with muffled thuds, spilling wrapped presents and tissue paper into the snow. "Go!" Dante managed to rasp out. "Get away from here. Not safe." But instead of running, instead of screaming or pulling out a phone to call the police, something that would have been a death sentence for them both, she rushed forward and dropped to her knees beside him. "You're hurt. You're bleeding so much," her voice trembled, but her hands were steady as she pressed them against his side, trying to staunch the flow of blood. "We need to call an ambulance." No, the word came out sharper than he intended. "No hospitals. No police." She stared at him, and he could see the war playing out behind her eyes. She was young, maybe early 20s, with a face that spoke of kindness and an innocence he'd lost long ago. Her brown eyes were wide with fear, but also with determination. "You'll die," she said simply. "Better than the alternative," he coughed, tasting copper. "Please, just go. Forget you saw me. I'm not leaving you here to die in an alley on Christmas Eve." Her voice was firmer now. I'm a nursing student. I can help you, but not here. Can you walk? Dante wanted to argue, wanted to send this foolish, brave girl away before she became collateral damage in his war. But the darkness was closing in faster now, and his options had narrowed to one. Accept her help or die. Where? He managed. My apartment. It's 2 blocks from here. Can you stand? With her help, he managed to get to his feet, though the world spun sickeningly around him. She was stronger than she looked, this slip of a girl, supporting a significant portion of his weight as they stumbled out of the alley. She'd abandoned her shopping bags, all those carefully chosen presents left in the snow and blood. The walk to her apartment was a blur of agony and determination. Dante focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on not collapsing and taking the stranger down with him. She lived in an old building, the kind with cracked plaster and a temperamental radiator, in a neighborhood that existed in the gray zone between respectability and decay. They climbed 3 flights of stairs that felt like climbing a mountain. Her apartment was small but clean, decorated with modest Christmas cheer. A small tree in the corner, paper snowflakes hanging from the ceiling, and the smell of pine and cinnamon. She helped him to the couch, and he collapsed onto it, staining her worn cushions with blood. "Don't move," she ordered, rushing to what he assumed was a bathroom. He heard water running, cabinets opening and closing. He should leave, should get out before he brought death to her doorstep. But he couldn't move, couldn't do anything but lie there and bleed. She returned with an armful of supplies. Towels, a first aid kit, bottles of antiseptic, and scissors. She knelt beside him and began cutting away his coat and shirt, her face set in concentration. "I'm Sophia," she said as she worked, her voice steady despite her hands trembling slightly. "Sophia Chin. I'm in my 3rd year of nursing school. I'm going to help you, but you need to tell me. How bad is it? How many times were you shot?" 3 times. Shoulder, side, leg, each word was an effort. She examined each wound with gentle but efficient hands. "The shoulder went through, I think. Clean. The leg too, it's a graze. But this 1 inch she pressed carefully around the wound in his side. The bullet's still in there. I can't. I don't have the tools to safely remove it. You need a surgeon." "No hospitals," he grabbed her wrist, surprised by how weak his grip was. "They'll find me. They'll kill us both." Sophia looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her putting the pieces together. The expensive clothes now soaked with blood, the gun still holstered at his hip, his insistence on avoiding authorities. She wasn't stupid. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Someone you should stay far away from." Too late for that. She pulled her wrist free and went back to work, cleaning the wounds with antiseptic that burned like fire. "I made a choice when I decided to help you. I'm not going to let you die. But I need you to work with me. This bullet needs to come out, or you'll get an infection that will kill you just as surely as the bleeding. You said you don't have the tools." "I don't have surgical tools, but I have," she trailed off, thinking. "I have some things. It won't be pleasant, and I'll need to use local anesthetic that I may not technically be allowed to have." She met his eyes. "A friend who works at the hospital sometimes lets me practice administrations. I have a small supply." Dante almost smiled. This innocent-looking girl was more resourceful than she appeared. "Do it." The next hour was the longest of Dante's life, and he'd lived through interrogations and torture. Sophia worked with intense concentration, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. She injected local anesthetic around the wound, then used sterilized tools, he didn't ask what or where from, to probe for the bullet. The anesthetic helped, but he could still feel pressure, still felt the violation of his body being opened. She talked while she worked, perhaps to calm herself or to keep him conscious. She told him about her family, her mother who worked 2 jobs to put her through school, her younger brother who was a sophomore in high school. She told him about her dream of becoming an emergency room nurse, about how she'd spent every Christmas Eve since she was 16 volunteering at the homeless shelter downtown, until tonight. "I'm sorry," Dante said at one point, the words slipping out unbidden. "For what?" "For ruining your Christmas." for putting you in danger, for bleeding on your couch." She laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Well, the couch was second-hand anyway. As for the rest, ask me again when I'm not elbow-deep in your abdomen trying to extract a bullet." She found it finally, a small piece of metal that had caused so much damage. She extracted it carefully, then immediately began the process of cleaning and closing the wound. Her stitches were neat and precise, the work of someone who'd practiced the skill countless times. When it was done, she sat back on her heels, her hands shaking now with aftermath. "You should be in a hospital," she said quietly. "You've lost a lot of blood. You need fluids, antibiotics, monitoring. I did what I could, but I'm not a doctor." "You saved my life," Dante's voice was rough. "Whatever else happens, you saved my life tonight." Sophia cleaned up the supplies, disposing of bloody towels and used materials in plastic bags. She helped him into her bedroom, the only bed in the small apartment, and brought him water and some pills. "Antibiotics," she explained. "I keep them on hand for emergencies, apparently. Take 2 now, then 2 every 8 hours. And these are for pain. You shouldn't have these. I shouldn't have a bleeding mobster in my bed either. But here we are." This time Dante did smile. "Fair point." She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes serious. "Who did this to you?" "People who want me dead. There's a long list." "Will they come looking for you?" "Eventually, but not here. They don't know about you, and I'll make sure it stays that way." "How?" "By leaving as soon as I can walk. Tomorrow, if possible." Sophia shook her head. "You're not leaving tomorrow. You can barely move now, and if you tear those stitches, you'll bleed out. You need at least a few days to recover." "I can't stay here. It's too dangerous for you." "I'll take that risk. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Who I am. What I do." "Then tell me." Dante studied her face, seeing the determination there, the stubborn set to her jaw. She deserved the truth, deserved to know what kind of monster she'd saved. "My name is Dante Moretti. I run the Moretti family, one of the largest criminal organizations on the East Coast. I deal in things that would keep you up at night. I've done things, ordered things done, that can never be forgiven. I'm not a good man, Sophia. I'm probably not even a decent 1 inch." He waited for horror, for disgust, for her to order him out despite his injuries. Instead, she simply nodded. "I figured it was something like that. The gun, the determination to avoid police, the professional way you assess threats even while bleeding out." She stood, moving toward the door. "I'm going to sleep on the couch. Call if you need anything. And Dante, Merry Christmas." She closed the door softly behind her, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the distant sound of church bells ringing in Christmas morning. The next days passed in a fever dream. Dante drifted in and out of consciousness, his body fighting infection and blood loss. Sophia was there each time he woke, checking his wounds, forcing him to drink water and eat small amounts of soup and toast. She changed his bandages with gentle efficiency, administering antibiotics and pain medication with the skill of someone beyond her years. On the 3rd day, Dante woke feeling clearer than he had since the shooting. The fever had broken, and while he was still weak, the fog had lifted from his mind. Sophia sat in a chair by the window, reading a textbook, a mug of tea cooling on the small table beside her. "What day is it?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. She looked up, a smile lighting her face. "December 27th. You're back with us. How do you feel?" "Like I was shot 3 times. "That's accurate." She came over and felt his forehead. "No fever." "That's good. The wounds are healing cleanly. You got lucky, no major organs hit, no serious infections. Though you're going to have some impressive scars. Add them to the collection." She helped him sit up, propping pillows behind him. The movement pulled at his stitches, but the pain was manageable. "You need to eat something more substantial. I'll make you some eggs." As she cooked in the tiny kitchen, Dante took in the apartment with clearer eyes. It was cramped but cozy, every surface showing signs of careful maintenance and cleaning. Her textbooks were stacked neatly on a shelf alongside a small collection of novels. Photos were pinned to a board above her desk. Sophia with an older woman who shared her features, must be her mother. Sophia with a young man, likely her brother. Sophia in scrubs at what looked like a hospital orientation. She brought him a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, sitting on the edge of the bed while he ate. He was hungrier than he'd realized, and the simple food tasted better than anything from the five-star restaurants he usually frequented. "Your family must be worried," he said. "Christmas just passed, and you've been taking care of me instead of celebrating with them." A shadow crossed her face. "I told my mom I picked up extra shifts at the hospital where I'm doing my placement. She's used to me working holidays, and my brother's been staying with friends. They're fine." "You're a terrible liar." "I'm working on it." She took his empty plate. "Your turn. Your family must be looking for you. You've been missing for days." Dante sighed. "My second-in-command, Marco, will be handling things. He knows how to manage the business when I'm unavailable. But yes, they're looking for me. And the Volkovs know they failed, which means they're either scrambling to finish the job or preparing for war." "The Volkovs? Russian? Crime family. We've had an uneasy peace for years, but someone convinced them to break it. Or someone used them to get to me." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "This is your life? Always looking over your shoulder, never knowing who to trust." "It's the life I chose. The life my father chose for me before that." "Did you have a choice?" The question was more perceptive than she knew. "I thought I did. When I was younger, I wanted something different. College, maybe, or the military. Something legitimate. But my father died when I was 20, and suddenly I had a choice. Let the family fall apart, let our people, hundreds of families who depended on us, become vulnerable to rivals, or step up and take control. So you took control." "I took control. I was good at it, it turned out. Better than my father, maybe. I made the family stronger, more powerful, more secure. But the cost," he trailed off, staring at nothing. "The cost is everything else. Normal life, trust, peace. The ability to walk down a street on Christmas Eve without wondering if this is the night someone finally succeeds in killing me. You could leave. Walk away. Men like me don't get to walk away. We either die in power or die trying to leave. There's no retirement plan, no happy ending. Just survival, day after day, until luck runs out." Sophia reached out and took his hand. Her skin was warm against his. "Maybe your luck changed. Maybe surviving this, meeting someone who could help you. Maybe that's a sign that there could be something different. Something better. You saved my life, Sophia, but you can't save me from what I am. What I've done. I'm not trying to save you from anything, but while you're here, recovering in my apartment, hiding from people who want you dead, maybe you can just be a person. Not a boss, not a criminal, just a man. Is that possible?" Dante looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone extraordinary. Not naive, despite her youth, but genuinely good in a way he'd forgotten existed. She'd risked everything to help him, asking for nothing in return, and now she was offering him something he hadn't had in years. A moment of peace. A chance to simply exist without the weight of his empire crushing him. "I can try," he said quietly. The next week passed in a strange suspension of reality. Sophia went to her classes and clinical rotations, returning each day to check his wounds and bring him food. Dante healed steadily, regaining strength. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She told him about her patients at the hospital, the challenging cases and the small victories. He told her about the legitimate businesses he'd built alongside the illegal ones, his attempts to gradually shift the family's interests toward legal enterprises. They watched old movies on her laptop, argued about books, and played cards. She beat him at poker 3 times in a row, claiming her nursing school friends had taught her to read tells. He taught her how to make proper Italian pasta from scratch, his grandmother's recipe, working around his still healing wounds. One evening, as snow fell outside the window and they sat together on the couch, Dante finally strong enough to leave the bed. Sophia asked the question he'd been dreading. "What happens when you leave?" I go back to my life. Make sure the Volkovs pay for their betrayal. Shore up security. Review every business deal, every alliance. Figure out who else might be planning to make a move. And us? The word hung in the air between them, as if there could be an us between a mafia boss and a nursing student. As if the past week had been anything more than a moment out of time, destined to end the moment he walked back into his world. There can't be an us, Sophia. You know that. Why not? Because my life is death, violence,
Danger.
Every person close to me becomes a target. My sister lives in a guarded compound, unable to move freely, always afraid. My mother died because someone thought killing her would hurt my father. That's what happens to people I care about. So your solution is to care about no one. My solution is to protect you by staying away once I'm healed. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady but sad. You're probably right. This has been like something out of a movie, hasn't it? Like we're in a snow globe, separate from the real world. But snow globes aren't real. Eventually, the water settles, and we all have to face reality. I'm sorry, Dante said, and meant it. If things were different. But they're not, she stood, putting distance between them. You should sleep. Your wounds still need rest to heal properly. She retreated to her bedroom, leaving him on the couch that had become his bed now that he was mobile. Dante lay awake long into the night, listening to the sounds of the city and the soft sounds of Sophia crying in the next room. Each sob a knife in his chest more painful than any bullet. 2 days later, Dante made contact with Marco. He used a burner phone Sophia had bought for him, calling a number he knew was secure. His second-in-command answered on the first ring. Boss? Jesus Christ, where have you been? We thought.
I'm alive.
Can't tell you where. What's the situation? Marco's voice turned grim. The Volkovs are claiming they had nothing to do with the hit. Say it was a rogue element in their organization that's been dealt with. They're offering compensation and renewed alliance. Do you believe them? Not for a second. But we don't have proof. And starting a war without proof would turn other families against us. It's a smart play on their part. What about internally? Any signs of betrayal? None that I've found. But I'm still looking. Boss, you need to come back. People are starting to ask questions. The family needs to see that you're alive, that you're still in control. Soon. A few more days. Keep searching for the traitor. Someone set me up that night, and I want to know who. Understood. Should I send a detail to pick you up? Wherever you are.
No.
I'll come in when I'm ready. Alone. He ended the call and looked up to find Sophia standing in the doorway, holding her medical bag. Time for your last checkup, she said quietly. She examined his wounds with professional detachment. The stitches were ready to come out, the wounds healing well. She worked in silence, removing the sutures with careful precision. You're healing perfectly, she said when she was done. You'll be fully mobile in another week, though you should avoid strenuous activity for a while. Keep the wounds clean and dry. Watch for any signs of infection, though at this point it's unlikely. Sophia, you're going back. Tonight, probably. I heard enough of your phone call. She packed up her medical supplies. You don't have to explain. I understand. This was always temporary. Dante caught her hand. I want you to know that these days with you, they've been the most peaceful days I've had in 15 years. You gave me something I didn't think existed anymore. What? Hope. The feeling that maybe there's more to life than just survival. Tears welled in her eyes. Then stay. Walk away from that life. We could. We can't. You know we can't. But I can make sure you're protected. I can. I don't want your protection. I don't want money or guards or any part of that world. Her voice was fierce now, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to know that maybe we could have been something. In another life, in another world. Dante pulled her close, careful of his healing wounds, and kissed her. It was gentle and desperate all at once. A goodbye and a promise and an apology all tangled together. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, and for a moment, the snow globe was intact again. Reality held at bay. When they finally pulled apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. In another life, he whispered, I would have been a better man. Someone worthy of you. You are worthy. You just don't believe it. He left that night after Sophia had gone to bed, or at least pretended to. He left an envelope on her counter with enough money to cover her ruined couch, her lost Christmas presents, and her nursing school tuition for the next year. He also left a phone number, written on a small piece of paper. If you ever need anything at all.
D.
Marco picked him up 3 blocks away, his eyes going wide when he saw Dante's condition. Boss, what the hell happened? Who patched you up? A guardian angel, Dante said, sliding into the back of the armored car. Take me home. We have work to do. The return to his life was jarring. His penthouse apartment felt sterile and cold after Sophia's cozy space. His men gathered around him, relief evident on their faces, reporting on business and security. The Volkov situation needed managing. Supply lines needed oversight. Territory disputes needed resolving. Dante threw himself into work with renewed intensity, trying to drown out the memory of soft brown eyes and gentle hands. He sent men to discreetly watch Sophia's apartment, ensuring she was safe. He had Marco investigate her background thoroughly, looking for any threat she might face because of her association with him. There was none. She was exactly who she appeared to be, a good person trying to make a difference in the world. 2 weeks after leaving her apartment, Dante's men found the traitor. It wasn't the Volkovs at all. It was Giuseppe Ricci, a captain in his own organization, who'd been promised control of the family if he could arrange Dante's death. The Volkovs had been set up too, meant to take the fall for the assassination. Dante dealt with Ricci personally. It was brutal, necessary, and everything that Sophia would have hated about his world. The violence reminded him why he could never go back to her, why she was better off without him in her life. But she was always in his thoughts. He found himself wondering what she was doing, how her classes were going, whether she was safe and happy. He resisted the urge to drive by her building, to call the number he'd memorized from her phone. She deserved to move on, to find someone normal and good. Valentine's Day came, brutally ironic in its timing. Dante was in a meeting with the Volkov brothers, cementing their renewed alliance now that the real traitor had been exposed. It was productive but tense. Trust was not easily rebuilt. He returned to his penthouse to find Marco waiting with an odd expression. You have a visitor, boss. She's been here for an hour. I told her you were in a meeting, but she said she'd wait. Dante's heart stopped. Who? But he knew before Marco answered. He walked into his living room and found Sophia sitting on his leather couch, looking small and out of place among the expensive furniture and city views. She stood when she saw him, nervous but determined. Hello, Dante. Sophia, what are you doing here? How did you even find? I asked around. You'd be surprised what people will tell a sweet nursing student looking for the man who saved her brother from gang violence. She gave him a wry smile. I made up that part. But I found you. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. I've been thinking about that, about safety and risk and what it means to really live. She moved closer. I spent 2 months trying to forget you, trying to convince myself that you were right, that we couldn't work, that I should find someone safe and normal. But I can't, Dante. I can't forget you. Sophia, please. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. You think I'm naive, that I don't know what I'm getting into. But I do. I know you're dangerous. I know your life is complicated and violent and full of impossible choices. I know that being with you means I'll always be afraid, always be looking over my shoulder. She took his hands in hers. But I also know that in all my life, I've never felt as alive as I did taking care of you, fighting for your life, talking with you until dawn, seeing the man you could be when you let your guard down. I'm not asking you to change who you are or leave your life behind. I'm just asking you to let me in, to take the risk that maybe, Just maybe, some things are worth fighting for. Dante looked at her, this brave, foolish, extraordinary woman who'd saved his life and then refused to let him push her away. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to send her away, to protect her by keeping her at a distance. But his heart, that organ he'd thought had calcified years ago, had different ideas. If you do this, he said quietly, if you choose this, there's no going back. You'll be a target. You'll live with security, with restrictions. Your family will need protection. Your freedom will be limited. People will die around us because of us. You'll see me make terrible choices and do terrible things. Is that really what you want? I want you, she said simply. The rest we'll figure out together. Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest, feeling her heartbeat against his. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. He kissed her then, properly this time, not a goodbye but a beginning. When they finally broke apart, Sophia was smiling. Besides, she said, you still owe me a Christmas. You ruined my last one by bleeding all over my apartment. Dante laughed, really laughed, for the first time in longer than he could remember. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I'll hold you to that. The months that followed were an adjustment for both of them. Sophia finished her nursing degree with security discreetly watching over her. Her mother and brother were moved to a better neighborhood, into an apartment that just happened to have excellent security features. She learned to live with bodyguards and vetted friends, with the knowledge that her boyfriend was a criminal who wielded power over life and death. But she also got to see the man behind the reputation, the Dante who made her laugh with dry wit, who taught her to appreciate opera and good wine, who held her through nightmares about the night she'd found him bleeding in the snow. The man who was trying, slowly and imperfectly, to steer his organization toward more legitimate enterprises, reducing the violence that had defined his world for so long. Dante, for his part, discovered what it meant to have someone to live for rather than just survive for. Sophia attended charity galas on his arm, charming his associates and their wives with her genuine warmth. She worked as an ER nurse, seeing firsthand the consequences of the world he operated in, never shying away from the reality of it. They had their first major fight when she treated a young man who'd been caught in crossfire between rival organizations. She came home furious, confronting Dante about the cycle of violence he perpetuated. He tried to explain the complexities, the impossible choices between bad options and worse ones. They screamed at each other, said things they regretted, and then held each other while Sophia cried for the boy who died on her table despite her best efforts. I hate this, she whispered into his chest. I hate what your world does to people. I know. I hate it too. But I don't hate you. Even when I want to, even when it would be easier, I can't. I don't deserve your love, Sophia. But God help me. I'm selfish enough to take it anyway. A year after that Christmas Eve in the alley, Dante took Sophia back to that same street. She was reluctant at first, the memory still raw, but he insisted. The alley was clean now, no trace of blood or violence. He led her to the exact spot where she'd found him, where she'd made the choice to help rather than run. This is where my life changed, he said, his arm around her waist. This is where I stopped just surviving and started actually living. Because of you. Dante, what are we doing here? He turned to face her, then dropped to one knee in the snow. From his pocket, he pulled out a ring. A simple band with a single diamond, elegant and understated, like her. I'm a criminal, Sophia. I've done terrible things, and I'll probably do more before this life is done with me. I can't promise you safety or normalcy or an easy life. But I can promise you that I will love you until my last breath. That I will protect you with everything I have. That I will spend every day trying to be a better man. The man you saw in me even when I couldn't see it myself. He held up the ring, his hands steady despite the enormity of the moment. Sophia Chun, will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face, glittering in the Christmas lights that decorated the street, just as they had a year ago. You're impossible. You know that? Proposing in the same alley where you almost died. where I found you bleeding out and thought I'd be disposing of a body rather than saving a life. Is that a yes?" She dropped to her knees in the snow beside him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes, you impossible man. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll fight with you and love you and save you over and over again for the rest of our lives." They kissed there in the alley as snow began to fall again, as it had that Christmas Eve. But this time, there was no blood, no violence, no fear. Just two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to hold on, despite everything that logic and reason said should keep them apart. The wedding was small, held in a private chapel with only their closest people in attendance. Sophia wore a simple white dress and carried red roses. Dante wore a black suit and couldn't stop staring at his bride like she was a miracle he still couldn't quite believe. Marco stood as best man, and Sophia's mother cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. Maria, Dante's sister, embraced Sophia afterward. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing my brother back to life." At the reception, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Sophia looked up at Dante with those warm brown eyes that had first seen him not as a monster but as a man worth saving. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm the luckiest man alive. That somehow, against all odds, I found someone who sees me, all of me, and chooses to stay anyway. Always," she promised. "Through every danger, every impossible choice, every dark moment. I'm not going anywhere. Even when it gets hard. Especially when it gets hard. That's when you'll need me most." Dante kissed her forehead, pulling her closer as they swayed to the music. "I don't know what I did to deserve you. You bled in the right alley at the right time," she said with a slight smile. "And you were brave enough to let me help you. Brave enough to let me in, even when every instinct told you to push me away." Their life together settled into a rhythm that was anything but ordinary. Sophia continued working at the hospital, her skill as an ER nurse becoming legendary among her colleagues. She had a way with trauma patients, a calmness under pressure that saved lives. Her co-workers never knew that she'd honed that skill on a mafia boss bleeding out in her apartment, and she never told them. Dante gradually shifted more of the family's operations toward legitimate businesses. It was slow, dangerous work. You couldn't simply walk away from certain obligations, certain deals made with blood and oath. But year by year, the Moretti empire transformed. Real estate development, restaurants, import-export companies with actual legal goods. The criminal enterprises didn't disappear entirely. They couldn't, not without creating a power vacuum that would tear the city apart. But they diminished. There were still violent nights. Still emergencies where Dante would come home late with blood on his hands and darkness in his eyes. Sophia learned to recognize those nights, learned when to push and when to simply hold him. She never judged, but she never pretended it was okay either. She was his conscience, his anchor to the normal world he'd thought forever lost to him. Their first real crisis came 18 months into their marriage. A rival family, the Castellanos, made a move on Moretti territory, targeting several of their legitimate businesses. Dante's response was swift and brutal, the old way, the only way that rivals understood. 3 Castellano soldiers ended up in the hospital. 1 ended up in the morgue. Sophia was working the night they brought in the wounded men. She didn't recognize them at first, just saw trauma patients who needed her help. She worked on one for 2 hours, fighting to save his life from internal bleeding. It was only after, when police were taking statements and names were recorded, that she realized who he was, who had hurt him. She came home at dawn, still in her scrubs, and found Dante in his office, reviewing security reports. He looked up when she entered, and the moment their eyes met, he knew she knew. "Sophia. Don't." Her voice was cold, controlled. "Don't explain. Don't justify. I spent 2 hours trying to save the life of a man you tried to kill. Do you understand what that means?" I held his hand while he screamed in pain. I told his mother, Dante, that we were doing everything we could. He was part of an organization that tried to kill me. That would have killed you to get to me. I did what I had to do. There's always a choice. You could have found another way. There wasn't another way. His voice rose, frustration and guilt mixing into anger. You think I wanted this? You think I enjoyed it? I'm trying to build something different, something better, but I can't do that if I'm dead. If you're dead, if everyone I care about is dead, because I was too soft to do what needed to be done. So we just keep going in circles? Violence answered with violence. Forever? When does it end, Dante? I don't know. The words came out raw, torn from somewhere deep inside him. I don't know, Sophia. I'm trying. God knows I'm trying. But I'm still the man I've always been. The man who does terrible things to protect what's his. And if that man isn't good enough for you... Stop. She crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. That man is exactly who I married. I'm not naive, Dante. I knew who you were. I knew what you did. But seeing it, facing it directly like this, it's harder than I thought it would be. We can end this, Dante said quietly. I can arrange a divorce. Protection for you and your family. You could go back to your life, find someone. No, the word was fierce. We don't get to quit just because it's hard. We don't get to run away from each other when reality intrudes on our happiness. But we do need to be honest. You need to be honest with me about what you're doing, what choices you're making. And I need to be honest with you about what I can and can't accept. They talked through the night, really talked, in a way they hadn't since those days in her apartment. They established boundaries, lines that Dante would try not to cross. Sophia acknowledged that she couldn't ask him to be someone he wasn't, but she could ask him to consider alternatives before defaulting to violence. Dante agreed to involve her more in his decision-making, to let her be the voice of conscience he clearly needed. It wasn't a perfect solution. There would never be a perfect solution. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was a foundation they could build on. 2 years into their marriage, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. The news came with mixed emotions. Joy at the life growing inside her. Terror at bringing a child into their complicated, dangerous world. Dante's reaction was even more complex. He was thrilled, protective to an almost suffocating degree, and absolutely terrified. What if I'm like my father? He asked one night, his hand resting on Sophia's still flat stomach. What if I condemn our child to the same life I lived? The same choices? Then we'll make sure they have what you didn't, Sophia said. Real choices, real options. We'll raise them to be strong enough to choose their own path, whatever that is. What if the path they choose is this one? What if they want to follow me into the family business? Then we'll deal with it, together. But let's not condemn our child to a life they haven't lived yet. Okay? Let's just let them be a child first. Worry about the rest later. Dante hired more security, upgraded every system, ran background checks on everyone who came within 100 yards of Sophia. She tolerated it with good humor, understanding that his protectiveness came from love and fear in equal measure. Their daughter was born on a cold January night, arriving 3 weeks early and in a hurry. Dante nearly broke the hand of the doctor who was delivering her, his grip tight with fear. But when the nurse placed their daughter in Sophia's arms, when he saw that tiny perfect face and heard that first angry cry, something in him shifted. They named her Isabella Rose Moretti, after Dante's mother and Sophia's grandmother. Bella for short. She had Sophia's eyes and Dante's stubborn chin, and from the moment she entered the world, she owned them both completely. Fatherhood changed Dante in ways he hadn't expected. He found himself thinking about the future differently, not in terms of territory and power, but in terms of what kind of world he was leaving for his daughter. The violence that had once seemed inevitable now felt intolerable. How could he bring men home with blood on their hands when that blood might touch his child? He accelerated the transition of the family business, pushing harder toward legitimacy. It created friction with some of the older members, the ones who'd been with his father, who saw the old ways as the only ways. Marco supported him, as did his sister Maria, but there was grumbling in the ranks. Sophia went back to work part-time when Bella was 6 months old, needing the sense of purpose that nursing gave her. They hired a nanny, thoroughly vetted, of course, and installed enough security in their home to protect a head of state. Their life found a new rhythm. Dante's work, Sophia's shifts at the hospital, and the simple joy of watching their daughter grow. Bella's first word was Papa, and Dante cried. Her first steps were taken toward Sophia's outstretched arms, and they both cheered. She was a happy child, loved and protected, blissfully unaware of the complexity of her father's world. On Christmas Eve, when Bella was 2 years old, Dante took his family to the same street where Sophia had found him 3 years earlier. It had become a tradition, his way of remembering what he'd almost lost and what he'd found instead. "Tell me the story again, Mama," Bella demanded from her father's arms, bundled in a pink winter coat. Sophia smiled, taking Dante's free hand. "Well, it was a night just like this, very cold and snowy, and I was walking home from shopping when I found someone who needed help." "Papa," Bella said proudly, patting Dante's cheek. "That's right, your papa. He was hurt, and I helped him feel better. And then we became friends, and then we fell in love, and then we had you." It was a sanitized version, appropriate for a toddler, but it held the essential truth. Sometimes the most important moments in life came when you chose to help someone, when you chose love over fear, when you chose to stay rather than run. "I'm grateful every day," Dante said, looking at his wife and daughter, "that you didn't keep walking, that you stopped, that you stayed." "I'm grateful you let me," Sophia replied, "that you were brave enough to let someone save you." They walked home together through the snowy streets, a family carved from impossible circumstances, held together by love that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Dante carried his daughter, who was already falling asleep against his shoulder. Sophia walked beside them, her hand in his, their bodyguards keeping a discreet distance. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more moments when the darkness of Dante's world threatened to overwhelm the light Sophia brought to it. There would be difficult conversations with Bella as she grew older, questions about what her father did and why other children's fathers didn't have armed security. But they would face it together, as they'd faced everything else. Not perfectly, not without stumbles and fights and moments of doubt, but together, always together. That night, after Bella was tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Dante and Sophia stood by the window looking out at the city. Christmas lights twinkled across the skyline, and fresh snow was beginning to fall. "Do you ever regret it?" Dante asked quietly. "Stopping that night? Bringing me into your life?" Sophia turned to look at him, this complicated man she'd chosen to love. "Every day brings something challenging. Some days are harder than others. But regret you? Never. You're the best choice I ever made, Dante Moretti. The best risk I ever took." "I love you," he said, pulling her close. "More than I thought I could love anything. You and Bella, you're my redemption. My second chance at being more than what I was raised to be. You're already more than that. You were always more than that. I just helped you see it." They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who'd built a life from violence and blood and hope. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in white, making everything clean and new. And in that moment, in the peace of their home with their daughter sleeping safely down the hall, Dante Moretti, crime boss, husband, father, allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible. That maybe the story that began with blood in the snow on Christmas Eve could have a happy ending after all. Because sometimes the most dangerous men need saving too. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stop and help, even when every instinct screams to run away. Sometimes love is found in the darkest places, and sometimes it's strong enough to bring light even to the shadows. This was their story. Imperfect, complicated, beautiful in its messiness. A Christmas miracle wrapped in danger and sealed with hope. And as the snow fell on another Christmas Eve, 3 years after that fateful night, they held each other close and chose, once again, to face whatever came next together. Because that's what love is in the end. Not the absence of danger or fear or difficulty, but the choice to stand together despite it all. To save and be saved. To hope and fight and hold on, even when the world conspires to tear you apart. Dante had been saved by a bullet to the heart that Christmas Eve. Not the bullets that tore through his flesh, but the one that pierced his armor when a young woman with kind eyes chose mercy over self-preservation. And in saving him, Sophia had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. A love that was worth every risk, every fear, every impossible moment. That was their gift to each other, renewed every year on that snowy street corner. The gift of a second chance, of hope reborn, of love that refused to be defeated by circumstances or danger or the weight of the past. And as they finally turned from the window and headed to bed, hands linked together, they carried that gift with them into tomorrow and all the tomorrows to come. Together, always together, no matter what storms might rage outside their door. Because some Christmas miracles don't end when the snow stops falling. Some miracles keep going, day after day, year after year, sustained by nothing more and nothing less than the choice to love, to stay, to keep saving each other from the darkness. And that, perhaps, is the greatest miracle of all.